Their Stories podcast. I'm the writing king and ghostwriting guru, and I'm here with Shawn, who's going to talk to us about what leadership looks like from the employee or contractor level, and especially the negative side of leadership and what could be done instead of that. So, Shawn, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Shawn Abling, and I have had many experiences with both good and bad leadership on both sides of the aisle, actually. I was contractor, union worker, lead installer. I did pretty much all of that.
Sounds very interesting. I know I've had my share of bad leaders. In fact, I have difficulty thinking of a good one. So, what would you say is the sign of a bad leader? What is a red flag?
A red flag for me is one that really doesn't lead by example. When I'm working for someone, I want someone that leads by example. If they want me working hard, I would like to be seeing them working hard as well. I understand that's not always possible, but that's a biggie for me.
I see. So, give me an example of somebody leading by example.
Someone leading by example is someone like whenever I was a installer for Lucent, we had some in charges that would sit there, hand out job assignments, and then they really wouldn't do much else other than that. They expected the other people, the minions, the people making the lowest amount of money possible, and do all the work. I understand that when you gain seniority, you earn that right, but it's not always good to have people making 3 to 4 times less than you. You're making 3 to 4 times more than them, and they see you sitting around not really doing much at all.
Mm.
It doesn't really do well with morale, and it really doesn't make them wanna work.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. When employees see, if you have, say, a bunch of employees who are doing well, and then you hire somebody, even let's just say you hire somebody that's their peer, and that peer is a bad apple and doesn't do well, the quote leader quote who lets them get away with it, which is
Yeah.
a form of bad leadership, then lets everybody else know that they can get away with it, and that tends to produce a whole barrel full of rotten apples.
Yep.
And that's I've seen that many, many times. And the current thing where it's hard to fire people or let them go or whatever makes this even worse because then these rotten apples stay around. Now, I'm not in favor of firing people for little reason. Obviously, reasons are needed and good justifications. But when somebody's not doing their job, they should probably be retrained, transferred, fired, whatever's appropriate, rather than keeping them in the same barrel and let all the other apples rot. You need to show the troops that you don't put up with crap.
Exactly. And with the in charge being a union member also, they really can't fire or anything else. All they can do is just call up their supervisor and say, "Hey, we don't really need this guy here anymore. We don't have enough work for him." So then they transfer him over to back to they usually did back to the tool room, and then from the tool room they would go out to other job sites. And if they got passed around enough times, then the supervisors realize that he's a bad apple, and then they try to get rid of them. But being a union, it's really hard for the company to fire someone.
Yes, I
And
know that.
and it was really bad with this because we worked all over the area. We didn't have just one location that everybody worked in. One supervisor would have anywhere between 3 to 8 different job sites, and he can't be at all of them at all times, and he's supposed to spend a certain amount of time at the, home base as well, his office, to
Okay.
get paperwork and stuff done. So, it really got bad with having a lot of bad apples because I mean I worked alongside a lot of people that did maybe 15 minutes worth of work and a total of a 12-hour shift.
I've seen that. It can be common even in non-union shops. People find out how to get away with not doing work or do make work, make it look like they're busy when they're really not. Now, one thing I like to think about is what is the definition of a leader? To me, you see all these definitions, servant leader, this kind of leader, that kind of leader, but a leader is really simple. The definition is simple. It's in the name. It's a person who leads, somebody who takes to the group and moves them in the direction that the business or organization wants them to go. How that gets done is the type of leadership. So servant leadership, different kinds of things. That's a type of leadership. A lot of people mistake that as leadership. Leadership is simply getting people to go in the right direction.
Yeah.
That's basically what it is. And then there's techniques for doing it. And lots of things work, like servant leadership might not work as well in, say, a battle, like, and fighting in the Ukraine. I doubt if you got servant leaders or you got leaders who are like, do this, because that's what's necessary.
Yeah.
Perhaps I'm hypothesizing there. That's a great word, hypothizing.
Yeah.
So what you want is a leader who moves the group forward towards the goals of the business
Yeah.
and factoring in the goals of the individuals, I would say also, and that are part of the group and so forth. So he's got a wide variety of jobs. Now, if that entails the leader sitting on a butt or if the leader's doing the work, the key is that leader causing the group to move in a direction at the appropriate speed, in the appropriate direction, and getting the appropriate products.
Yeah.
If the answer is yes, it doesn't matter if the leader is not doing anything. If the answer is no, it matters. To me, that's the way I look at it now.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just gonna mention that there's like I was saying, some of the in charges. There's one in charge I worked for. He had not gotten a job turned in on time. 15 years that my buddies
Wow.
worked there.
Wow.
Turned in on time, and they weren't able to do anything about it. Like I said, the supervisors weren't able to do anything about it because he's union. He's got a bunch of seniority because he's been there 30 plus years. I mean, it's that's one of the places they send people to try to fire him is they put him on his job sites and they show up regularly on those job sites
Mm-hmm.
and they catch them goofing when they're supposed to be working. It took
Yeah,
a long time for them to do any of that.
of course, of course.
That's actually how I got pushed into being an in charge. Was I had a bunch of in charges taking credit for my work. So I got put with this guy and he actually got his job done on time for the first time ever
Interesting.
because I went in there and I did all the work. I gave him 15 minutes worth of stuff to do. He couldn't get 15 minutes of stuff done. And that was just because I wanted him to do something on his own job. And yeah, that guy was a big time character, which we won't really get into.
Yeah, I understand. I no need to get into personalities and people here.
Yeah.
More on a general level. Yeah, I mean, so that to me, that's what leadership is. It's being able to lead a group to
Yep.
where you want to go. I look at the old leaders from the past. Julius Caesar, he was right at the head of the troops. He was right there in the middle. So he'd be out in the charge. Alexander the Great, Patton. These are all leaders who were basically along with the troops, doing the job with them. They weren't afraid to do the job. Then you have the leaders that failed. Most of them aren't remembered anymore because they weren't at the front. You've got the whole Vietnam fiasco in America and Vietnam. The leaders were actually back here in the States. They weren't even in Vietnam. So of course it failed. They didn't even know what was going on. I mean, that's one
Or
reason. There's
by the
many
time
reasons.
yeah, by the time they knew what was going on, it was already too late to do anything about it
Yeah, and
because of the time difference.
my understanding to some veterans from that era is they had so many rules of engagement and things that were so weird that there was no way to win. You can only fight under these conditions. You can only blah, blah, blah. And it was like, you're either in a war or you're not. And
Yeah.
if you're not in a war, then what are you doing here? And was it a shooting war or isn't it? In Ukraine, of course, they have no back off on, hey, you show your head, you did. Either side. So I find that interesting that a leader also is a good leader is also not afraid to be embedded with the people he or she leads.
Yep. That's when I got to being in charge, I ended up getting all I was one of their best in charges. I got laid off because I didn't have the seniority. But I mean, those same guys that were doing 15 to 20 minutes worth of work in a 12-hour shift were working their butts off to be on my crew. And they're working right alongside me, hustling, everything. And that was because I was right there working with them. I did the job right alongside them because I mean, being in a union, you're all at the same level basically. You're all supposed to be in there doing that job. You're hired to do a job. You're supposed to be doing that job. And because I didn't sit down and just hand out job assignments, the people actually worked with me and they got the stuff done. And I didn't have a problem getting them to work.
Right.
And
Right.
then, whereas the other guys that were sitting around doing nothing, they had like, oh, that guy's worthless. That guy's worthless. You don't want him on your crew. He worked fine for me.
Yeah. Well, it depends on the quality of the leader. A bad
Yep.
leader does not cause the people who work for that person to want to do something. They don't want to do it because the leader's not good. That's often because the leader's not embedded with them.
Yep.
She's not doing the appropriate, is not willing to do the work along with the people there. Yeah, a good leader in my mind should not be afraid to go pick up the tools and start, start on an assembly line and start screwing screws and put the tires on every once in a while. If somebody needs help, come out there and show them how to do it personally. To me, that's what a good leader does. Bad leader, is just gonna let it slide, or let somebody else handle it, or not take care of it. Basically, not take care of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So leadership is very interesting. There's a lot of books on leadership. I've written a few myself. I've ghostwritten a few,
Yeah.
and it's very interesting the way that leaders need to work, and the views on leadership are as diverse as there are people on the planet. There's everybody has a different idea of leadership, and a lot of them align in certain categories. There's this kind of leadership, that kind of leadership, that kind of leadership. I'm sure the union shops had leadership types enforced from above. The union said, you're going to work this way. You tell me.
As an in charge, I never really got that. They had it in the contract what was expected, and you could do the bare minimum, which is just hand out job assignments and make sure the work was done right.
Uh,
Or you could go all the way to like I did. I went in there, I worked right alongside everybody. Actually, most of the time I actually gave myself the hardest spot or hardest thing to do and led that way. And like I said, I had people that had no problem working for me. They actually enjoyed it. They preferred to being on my job.
People want to work.
Yeah.
They want to do a good job generally. So if you let them do a good job and give them the tools that they need, they're going to do a good job. What always affected me often was not the immediate manager or leader, but one several up the rungs up the ladder,
Yeah.
where it have these weird rules and weird goals and stuff that had no bearing in reality, and then have to deal with it. I'm sure you ran into that. This is the Leaders and Their Stories podcast. I've been speaking with Shawn Abling, and we've been talking about leadership. So thank you for coming, Shawn. I don't know if you can hear me or not, and I appreciate your viewpoints on leadership, and it's been a fun podcast. Thank you.